Hey everybody, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Blind Banter. Tonight, just like the previous episode, we're just going to banter it and wing it. And I am here with my co-host, Carlos Garcia. How are you doing tonight, Carlos?
Not too bad, I think we had such a great conversation last podcast about challenges and meeting them that I feel like we should continue that. Last time we focused a little bit more on social, but obviously there's more challenges, and I think that we can more broadly apply it to more things than just blindness, right? So, for example, for me, one of the challenges, strangely enough, Lauren, and you might be surprised at this because of how intelligent I am now, but one of the challenges I had beforehand was actually my math. My math skills were actually really terrible when I was in middle school, and then going into high school, I had a B going into the second half of my first semester in high school, which is pretty terrible, And I ended up turning it around. And I think I want to talk about this because, a lot of people, blind people, not blind people, everyone has academic challenges. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about how I turned it around and how I think that can be more broadly applicable to everything. So one of the ways in which I turned it around, and I think that, Lorne, you've talked about this, is thinking outside the box, right? My instructors had always said, you need to study by doing this, right? Just read the book, do the problems, yada, yada, right? And that just wasn't working for me because I was wasting too much time. The problem wasn't so much that I wasn't doing well on the problems, it's that, in the time it took for most students to do 2 problems, I would do half of a problem. And it was terrible because, obviously the homework's supposed to take an hour. It takes me 4 hours. That's not good. So what I did instead was I stopped reading the book. And not reading the book really saved me a lot of time because I would just start trying to apply my abilities to solving the problem. And that actually completely changed my outlook on it because the book told you to solve the problem one way, and I would solve it a completely different way, but it would still obviously get the right answer. So, it really teaches you the importance of looking outside the box. And this really broadly applies to anything in the workplace and in school, whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's just really important to take a step back when you're having this serious challenge and you're banging your head against the wall and going, oh my gosh, I just don't have any way to fix this. I don't know how to solve it. It might take a chance to just broadly step back, try something that you've never tried before, right? Go out and do that, and you'll find that the solution is actually better than what everyone else proposes. I mean, Lorne, you're a big proponent of this. Tell us a story about a time that you did this, specifically thought outside the box and got a solution that was better than the alternative.
I'm not definitely talking about math. Let's put it that way.
You don't have my intellectual abilities.
Oh, no. B. I would have been so happy with a B. You have no idea. Yeah, so no, probably some of the easiest ways of thinking outside the box was when I was building computers for people. So when I still had a little bit more vision, I was able to build some gaming computers for people, as well as helping some farmers in rural Saskatchewan kind of get onto dial-up internet and being able to make a computer for them and kind of get them a low-cost, custom-made PC so that it would be a lot longer that they can use it for, and it would be something a little easier for them to use, so they wouldn't have to be held on customer service and all this stuff, because I could literally just come over, or I could go over there and help them. So it worked out really well. But being able to look at a problem that they had arisen, may it be we needed to create it in a barn, we needed to create it in a silo, hayloft. I've had to install computers in the craziest places, but being able to also do a lot of the gaming stuff. So when Call of Duty started becoming big, one of the computers we wanted to do was we wanted to do a Call of Duty kind of LAN tournament type game system. So we were able to go to the local acrylics manufacturer in Saskatchewan and get a couple pieces of bulletproof Lexan, so aka bulletproof glass, and we took it out to a field and we shot it with a shotgun with a 30-30, and we were able to really kind of
don't do this at home, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Disclaimer.
When you're in a big field and it's really good and there's no one around literally for, let's say, 3 to 5 miles, you're okay. But it was really interesting because we were able to kind of put them together, and we were able to actually have the bullets lodged into the actual case, so that when we built it, you could see like the 357 put in there. You could see part of the buckshot in there. So it was really interesting to be able to think outside of the box and learn how to create different things that were definitely one of a kind. We also used like a water jug, like I don't know if they have them in the States, but like Culligan, the ones that are in the water coolers. So one of those big jugs, we cut one of those in half and lined it with metal, and we built a computer in there so that we could put lights all around it, and it was just an entire glowing bottle of computer, but it also had a built-in handle to it, which is really interesting. So that was just some of the stuff to do, to think outside of the box. Now, also dealing with the city of Ottawa, I've done a few different things with CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, as well as CTV, which is the Canadian television. And yeah, I know it's pretty original. Yeah, exactly. But there was a few issues with the LRT, so our electric train system, and there was so many opportunities for them to consult with people that were blind and visually impaired. And even from day one of when they announced it, we were saying, okay, well, start working with us. But they felt that it was more intriguing to go on a trip to Europe to see kind of how they do it. And of course, when they came out and tried to do some of the stuff, well, it didn't quite work out the same way, and they didn't really utilize anything. So one of the worst parts was one of the stations when you would come out, the lip was so wide that when we did our first kind of walkthrough as people with disabilities, there was a lady in a wheelchair and she completely tipped upside down. And if it wasn't literally for her seatbelt, she would have fallen right out of her wheelchair because, again, they didn't follow through with the ramp. And they said, oh, well, we should have checked that out. Yeah, no kidding. But again, it was already built. So how do you change that if it's already built? Unless, okay, well, maybe we won't open up this door at this station, but all the other ones are, are okay. But just something so simple would have been, just learning how to lay the track right and get the architects to put that into thought would have definitely been something. But being able to work on something when it was being built compared to after the fact, it doesn't usually work. So that was one of the main things that we were able to do with some of the infrastructure, but unfortunately it wasn't enough of it. So
yeah, I mean, I think the computer story in particular is very, very much outside the box, right? No one would have thought maybe it's because of my city roots and like I never would definitely go and shoot like some plexiglass. But it's definitely something unique, and I'm sure that these people, even if the computers don't work anymore, I'm sure that they still keep them around because it's like, wow, no one else has a computer that actually looks like it was shot at and has all these bullets lodged in it. So definitely shows you how you can take any situation and kind of make it into an advantageous one, as I did with my math and as you did with your computers. I mean, but anything really, I mean, one of the ones that I've used the most, and I talked about this in the past, has been kind of using your blindness to your advantage, right? And this really came about a few years ago when I was sitting around with my friend's sister, and she's like a beautician, right? So she's all into style and all this, and she told me, Carlos, why aren't you dressed well? And me being me, I'm like, well, how do you expect that to work, right? Like I'm blind. She's like, why don't you have me pick out your clothes, right? Or have someone who can see pick out your clothes. And me being me, I'm like, I don't need any woman picking my clothes yet. This is obviously not what I think like now, but this is a little bit how I thought back then. And she's like, Carlos, you do, because I'm not trying to hurt your feelings or anything, but you look like terrible.
nice.
because when you realize what you have when you're blind, right? Whether you have a dog or whether you have a cane, whatever, people are going to look at you when you walk into a room, right? And if you present a terrible image, if you present this image like, oh, this guy's wearing like some dowdy shirt and, you know, some ripped jeans that aren't ripped fashionably, they're just ripped because I haven't replaced them, then I'm not going to present the best image from if I'm dapperly dressed and I look good and you know, I have good style. People are going to go, wow, that guy's blind, and I remember him because he walked in with a dog. But not only that, but I strike a good impression, right? So it really shows you that you can use almost anything to your advantage. And sometimes, especially, I know for me, I tend to be a little bit more stubborn, right? Whenever somebody challenges me on this, like when she first told me, like, you look terrible. For me, I was like, no, you just, you know, this is just not your style. You don't know what you're talking about. This is my style. And she's like, no one has that style because it's terrible. Like, yeah, it's your style, but it's because it's terrible. And so, you know, like as blind people, I think we like to be independent, and that's very great, right? I'm not saying that you should be walking around and not being independent. But on the other hand, it's also important to take this criticism that people give you that, you know, it's not necessarily your fault, right? Because it was not my fault that I had picked out bad clothes, right? That was just, obviously I can't see, so maybe what I thought sounded cool from the description wasn't necessarily that cool. On me, and you know, didn't contrast well with my skin tone or didn't contrast well with my body shape, whatever it is, right? And that's why it's really important to take these criticisms from people who can see. And I don't want to use the word use people who can see, but at least, you know, take advantage of what they're telling you, because a good amount of it, especially if you trust them, right? If they're like your sister, your wife, your friend, whatever it is, it's very much a very useful thing. I mean, Lorne, have you had these things where I know you're not as stubborn as I am, but have you had these things where you're a little bit more stubborn and then you thought to yourself, like, hey, the criticism that this person is actually raising is valid and I should probably take it?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I don't know if I would go down to as being that I'm not as stubborn as you are. I'm actually extremely stubborn, but I've
I'm
just
sure your
learned
wife would
how
have
to.
something to say about that.
Oh, well, she would agree. Um, but see, especially when it comes to fashion. Now, I've not always been the greatest, but I've been decent, and that was one thing that she was kind of surprised when she met me. But again, that was very prairie fashion, but it worked for
What
me.
is
And now
prairie fashion?
a lot of like button up dress shirts and like dress pants,
So like,
but
let me,
like
I mean,
plaid,
I
a
don't
lot
know
of
what
plaid
you
and
wear
checkered.
now. What do you wear now?
If I'm working, it's usually a nice pair of khakis or dress pants and like a nice polo.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm just around and I'm not actually at work, it's usually khakis and like an Under Armour shirt.
Gotcha.
Because I think 95% of my shirts are all Under Armour, so it's all kind of that sport material, but it's just super lightweight. It's nice. I love them. But
Gotcha.
that's pretty much what I wear. And then kind of in the fall time, I live in sweaters all the time. So, and then in the winter time, I live in ski pants, which is absolutely hilarious. Because even out, yeah, even at work,
insulated ones?
Oh yeah, of course. Of course.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they're like.
So you make noise
pants.
when you watch.
I do actually. But I don't know, because the last place I worked, it was just really cold all the time. So
Yeah.
I had these pair of snow pants. Well, I think they called them just insulated snow pants. They weren't full on ski pants, but they were pretty big, and man, they were comfy. But I was always nice and warm and never had an issue. But yeah, I was, you know, I'd be walking down the hall.
Yeah.
So it was putting some of the high heel noises to task, that's for sure. But no, so that's I think style is definitely something that's very big for people, because especially if you're visually impaired, it really helps kind of blend in, I guess, if you have a decent fashion style. And of course, if you're fully blind, yeah, it's definitely going to be obviously a lot more difficult. Now, I'm pretty much colorblind for 95% of colors. So for me, you know, something may be a dark purple, but I think it's black, and things just don't mix. But that's why you go and marry a fashion designer like I did, and then you're all good to go. But
That's
I
the
don't
advice for
think,
tonight, guys. Marry
yeah,
a fashion designer.
there you go.
All your
but yes,
problems will be solved.
yeah, exactly. Well, you get to go to runway shows all the time and fashion shows, so
Ooh,
that's always interesting. It's actually not
have
bad.
some eye candy, which for totally
Uh,
blind people like me is great.
yeah, exactly. Wow, you should look at that, Carlos. It's intermission. Yeah, I knew that.
She looks great, man, or he looks great. Like, oh, tell me about it. Literally.
Yeah, but so being, I wouldn't say you're using people's vision, but I think utilizing the people around you that do have vision as well as fashion sense is probably going to be extremely beneficial to you. I wouldn't really trust the person at the store because, of course, they're going to say, "Oh my God, it looks amazing on you." Well, it looks amazing because this shirt costs $60.
Or they're not
You
going to
just
lie.
want me to buy.
I mean, how many salespeople have you had go, that looks terrible?
Yeah, I can't think I've ever had one of them. Oh, it looks great. Come on. Oh, by the way, you know that there's no returns, so it looks fantastic on you.
Right.
Yeah, so, but there usually are a lot of people that are willing to help you kind of give you fashion advice. And I've used before, kind of in a pinch, I've used Be My Eyes, where I just randomly hit people, and if I can find someone to go, "How's your fashion style?" and they go, "It's okay." Yeah, no, next one. "How's your fashion style?" "Ah, I'm pretty good." "Okay, perfect. How do I look?" And then you can kind of get them to give you an idea. And I find that because they always want to help so much through Be My Eyes, they're usually really good that way. And it's really interesting because Be My Eyes is around the world. You can really get input from different people in different parts of the world. And fashion is so different universally. So like in Ireland, you're going to find someone that thinks that dressing up is so different than when you're in Italy compared to when you're in Iceland.
Yeah.
So, when I went to all three of those different places, people dressed so almost polar opposite that it was really interesting to see. And being able to use Be My Eyes, I have always found them to be very helpful. I don't know if Ira would be kind of the same way, but I guess it all really depends. Like, I don't know. I know that with Be My Eyes, it's a very large female, I guess, grouping of people and volunteers. And I found that they're usually more willing to help you than more of the male persuasion on those types of things.
Yeah, I've had that kind of experience as well. Like, especially when you're wearing a suit, a lot of the males will just tell you like, "Oh yeah, that looks good, man," and they don't really give you any suggestions. They just say like, "That looks good," whatever. They don't even. I've had a couple of guys who are good, and they're like, "Yep, that's the kind of thing I'd wear," or whatever, right? But the females are a little bit more like, "Oh, that looks good," except just one little thing, and this is really nothing serious, but it's like those little things that people catch, right? So I think that's the most important. And I feel like that's just because whenever I find that men generally, when they dress themselves, they're just like, "Yeah, this is all right. I got 2 days shave, it's 2 days stubble, but it's fine." It's no real big deal. But I feel like women, for better or for worse, are definitely a lot more interested in their appearance. I'm not necessarily endorsing it, right? But I'm just like, that's just the case. And they notice those flaws, especially when they're looking for a guy as well. Whereas men, like I said, they just kind of give you like, "Yeah, it looks good." And maybe there's like a stain on a jacket or something, right? And they just don't even, it doesn't matter. This one's good, right? So if you're definitely looking to go for like an important interview or something where somebody's really going to judge you, maybe a date or whatever, I would definitely try. You're going to use Be My Eyes, you're going to use Ira, whatever it is, maybe friends. Definitely talk to a few people because you'd be surprised at what you get. I've gotten that same thing where, I called one Ira agent and he was like, "Yeah, man, that jacket looks good." And like, yeah, it contrasts really well with that shirt, whatever, right? And I called another agent and she's like, I wouldn't use that shirt. Like maybe a different shirt. And so we went through like all the shirts I have. She's like, that one right there. Like, she picked out a different one. And it was, from what I understood, it was just that much better. And so it's definitely really important, especially if you're totally blind like myself, to get multiple opinions. Or if, like Lorne says, you're married to a fashion designer, then it's probably enough. But I don't know, maybe you want to get a second opinion there too. And I think it's so important because, like I said, as a blind person, you're going to draw attention. And you don't want yourself to be memorable in their eyes because you fit the stereotypic image of a blind guy. Like, oh, he had a stain on his jacket, but it's okay because he's blind, right? Like, I hate that. I want to be able to, and this isn't necessarily because I want to fit into the sighted world or whatever, but I just don't want to have people, say like, oh, that's okay because he's blind. I don't want anyone to excuse me from doing something because I'm blind. I mean, like, it reminds me of when I was a wrestler, and early on in my wrestling career, they used to say, Carlos, stay here. You don't need to roll up the mats. You're blind, And at the time, it just seemed like, oh yeah, you're right. And then one time I had a coach, a really great guy. He was like a Vietnam vet, and he didn't care, right? He said whatever was on his mind. He goes, what are you doing here? Because I was just sitting while they were rolling the mats up, and he's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, they're rolling up the mats. I can't see. He's like, you have two hands. You can roll mats. Come on. And so I was like, oh, wow, like this dude. And he's like, right here. He just grabbed my hand. He didn't even, sighted guy or anything, just grabs my hand. He goes, there's a mat right here. Roll it up. I'm like, oh, okay. So like, and sometimes as blind people, I feel like we think that's a little harsh. But that's the type of person that I needed in my life at the time, because I did tend to use that as an excuse, right? Like, oh, hey, guys, I'm sorry I can't help you, but I'm blind, so I can't help you guys roll mats, right? And this guy saw through that. He's like, you don't need to see to roll a mat, man. You just need to have two hands. And that really opened my eyes, and well, metaphorically speaking, that really showed me how important it is to kind of take on those challenges, especially if somebody tells you can't do it, instead of just going, you know what, they're right. Go out and actually try doing it, right? Go out and try doing it, because I feel like it's one of those things where you think you can't do it, but my biggest success and my biggest passion has come where I go, you know what, you told me I couldn't do this, and look what I'm doing now. I mean, Lorne, I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, how we both like proving people wrong, and we both like winning a lot. Can you think of a specific instance where you've kind of done that, where somebody says, Lorne, you're never going to do this. Like, don't even try. And you go, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Scuba diving.
Really?
Swimming with sharks.
Did they bite your leg off?
No, I can still walk.
Well, did that answer my question?
No. Just small little nibble. One or two
took a
toes,
chunk
not a big
out,
deal. Yeah.
No, I want to hear about this, because you've never told me this story.
About which one?
The swimming with sharks, scuba diving.
Oh yeah.
Was that the same time?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, you don't usually.
Were you in that cage when you were swimming with sharks? Because that's not the same, man.
No. So there was one when we were at the San Diego Zoo. We were able to kind of go in where we were with a bunch of nurse sharks. Oh. So it's obviously not great whites, but you're not. Really
I was going to say they're not pissed off sharks.
No, exactly. So, yeah, it was kind of like it wasn't a cage. It was somewhat of a fence, but you were able to kind of like, as they were swimming by, you were able to like, touch them and be able to feel them, and you would hold out a fish. It wasn't on a pole or anything. It was just by the tail, and they would come by and eat them. So it was really interesting. White. No. Wow.
Would you do this with great whites?
No. I definitely want that cage.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But yeah, so we did that in San Diego. I've done that before in Mexico. Was it Mexico? Yeah, Mexico as well. And then we did that once in Florida as well. Coming by. A great white nurse shark. Yeah, so we were able to do that, and so that was really interesting. And then scuba diving, we were in It was Mexico as well. And I was able to go with my father, who is a very experienced diver. And so he was able to kind of teach me in the pool. And then we went kind of on this little one, and we went, I think it was like 30 or 40 meters down. Not a lot, but again, just to kind of, for a beginner, that's pretty much deep enough to where you're not going to get the bends if you don't decompression properly. So that was definitely fun. Deep sea fishing, I've been multiple times doing different things, so they've
Did
been
you
all
catch
over
one?
Oh yeah, multiple times. So
What'd you catch? A marlin?
I've never caught a marlin. Barracudas. We caught tunas before, bonitas, amberjack. Uh, Apparently, I had caught a shark because when we were trolling in Mexico, and I caught this little bonita tuna, and so we put it on this thing, and all of a sudden this, like, the reel just started just going, and we were able to see the top dorsal fin, so they thought that it was a reef shark that I ended up catching, but I didn't land it. Snapper, lots of snapper, cod, pollock, haddock.
Snook?
No, I don't think I've ever caught a snook, but like, when we
I
were
only know
in
about these from John D. McDonald novels. Check him out, guys. He's a great author. Old, but great.
But yeah, so Iceland, like, we caught a lot of haddock and pollock and cod, and that was really good because we brought them back up and we literally fried them up on the boat. Absolutely delicious. Snapper in Florida. So I've been able to do a lot of that type of thing. Luging was extremely fun too when I
Now,
was
what
in
is
Calgary.
luge?
So luging is, think of it like a skateboard that you lay on,
Okay.
and then what you do is you literally just go on a track. So you lay down on it, and you can kind of steer by your body, and then they put you down a really big ramp, and you go really, really, really fast. It's almost like
How fast?
bobsledding, but laying down. I don't know exactly how fast. I know that they had different wheels on mine, so it didn't go, like
they were
like
scared that you'd break at
like
the
the
bottom.
pros. Yeah, but yeah, just so to the general public, you didn't go as fast as the actual ones, because I think they can go up to like 60, 70 miles per hour type thing,
Are
because
you
there's really
strapped in?
nothing there. No.
Oh,
No.
jeez.
Well, no, because if you hit the dirt, I'd rather fly off instead of staying with the board, and
Yeah.
because then you're
I
just
thought this was
literally as
snow.
rigid. No, luging. So it's
Oh,
street
okay.
luging. Yeah, it's like bobsledding, but without the ice, and
Okay,
you lay down
wow.
on a skateboard. So
I'm
yeah,
gonna do this now.
it was extremely fun. Bobsledding we were able to do too in the at the Olympic Park in Calgary, and that was obviously on ice too. So things like that, I absolutely love when people tell me I can't do things,
Have you
and I can prove
skydived
them wrong. I have not yet.
or skydove? Because I know I had done it, and you talked about doing it over the summer,
Yeah,
last summer.
so I was going to do it last summer, but with the birth of Sky, and with everything that was happening, and with my previous job letting me go due to no funding anymore for it, it was kind of something that we put on hold, and we were actually going to plan to do it this year, but of course, due to the current situation,
Yeah.
although it's extremely social distancing, you can't really be tied with someone right
person.
off the bat. Exactly. You can't quite do a tandem. So that's going to hopefully wait till next year. But that's definitely something that's on my list, and I'd still like to do it. But I have bungee jumped before, and that was a thrill.
I'm more afraid of that. What if the cord snaps?
What if the parachute doesn't pop out?
The odds of that happening are much lower than the odds of the cord snapping.
Not if you have a good cord, and it's not, it's not from the Acme cord company.
Wait, so when you bungee jump, you jump off, and then you hit the end, and then it brings you back up, right?
Yes.
So then you're essentially bungeeing around a little bit.
Yeah. So of course you don't just snap right back to the platform. Just whoop, here we go. I'm back up here.
Right, let's jump again. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So you
And you go
bungee a
ahead
few
first?
times. Yes. Yeah.
I remember I made a joke because my friend told me that he's from New Zealand. So he's like, yeah, I don't bungee jump because a few people I know who've done it have lost their eyes because they try to not go head first. And the biggest thing is to go head first for some reason.
Of course.
Explain it. And I
Well,
was like,
it's because you're tied up by your feet.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, it's important to go head first and then go head first. And I'm like, I don't mind. I could lose my eyes. He goes, no, man, I don't think you understand. Oh. And then it's funny because, he's Australian and he's New Zealand. He's like, should I laugh? I was like, yeah, you can laugh. That's the whole point. It's like, I just didn't know. I didn't know because, like, this, I didn't want to be insensitive. And I was like, no, you're not being insensitive. Like, and that's another thing, right? When you're blind, I don't know about you guys, but like I make jokes like that all the time where I'm like, oh, I didn't see the presentation. Can you show it again? That type of thing. I did that today during a work meeting. It didn't go well initially because the guy's like, what's the problem? Am I having technical issues? I'm like, Anyways, so yeah. Back to bungee jumping. Sorry to go on a tangent there, but I thought that was funny.
Oh no, and that's really key for utilizing any type of disability is being able to laugh at it. If you can laugh at it and use humor to, I guess, overcome some of the issues, like when Carlos was talking just back a little bit about when he would face a problem and he'd say, okay, I'm going to take a break from it, come back later. If you have a problem that sometimes that you can't come back to, that you kind of have to do it in the moment, just being able to almost tell yourself a joke or be able to diffuse a situation with a joke is always, well, I find extremely beneficial. And being able to just laugh at yourself and saying, I understand that this may seem like a monumental issue right now, but I can pretty much guarantee myself that within a half hour, maybe next day, a week, a month later, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And that's going to be something that I can look back at and go, actually, that wasn't that big of a deal, but I learned, A, B, and C. And I was able to overcome that by utilizing my blindness or utilizing the ability to think outside of the box or in a different avenue compared to other people that would have had vision. And I was able to see another outcome on how to get to the finish line or get to the end product that I desired to get to.
And sometimes it's not even, using your blindness or whatever. Sometimes it's literally just conquering your fear of doing that, right? Because I feel like, obviously there's a lot of obstacles if you're blind, but sometimes the biggest obstacle is your fear. And your fear convinces you that because you're blind or because you're disabled, that you're not going to be able to do this and, that people are going to laugh at you or whatever it is. I know I've had that, thing a bunch of times. And realistically, most of the time, those fears are completely unfounded, right? Unless you're doing, you're thinking like, man, am I going to survive doing something like base jumping? Right? I wouldn't want to do anything like base jumping. I know that the fatality rate there is a lot higher than any of the bungee jumping, skydiving, right? Like, oh man, like I'll be fine, right? No. So obviously, you gotta be feared. Sometimes fear is a good thing, but oftentimes it's just a remnant left over from the old days when we had to run from lions and the not fearful type guy. But have you had any fearful episodes?
Yeah, well, I think everybody has had fearful episodes, and there's been times where if I have a bad eye day, sometimes it can be a little bit more fearful than others. But it's just something that you kind of have to learn to overcome, and you have to kind of, I guess, take it with a grain of salt and take that fear and learn to harness it to make it into a power to go further and to use that as your fuel to be able to overcome whatever situation you need to.
Yeah. That's kind of how I use it too. And I've learned really just to ignore it and like you said, right, use it as a power. I think it was Stephen King who said, like, the best thing to do when something is messing up your life is to take it and put it into a harness and make it work for you. Right. So that applies to fear, that applies to anger, that applies to sadness, whatever it is. You can take that and make it motivate you, right? Because obviously, usually the roots are something a little bit that are to some extent valid, but realistically the end from what it wants you to do, right? Like if you're fearful and it's like, don't do this, do this. Usually the alternative isn't necessarily the best thing. So use that to motivate you, to push you into the right direction. And like Stephen King says, right, harness it and make it work for you.
For sure. Well, unfortunately, again, it's that time where we are now running almost out of time. So I want to thank everybody for listening to us and joining us for another edition of Just Bantering. You can reach us via email at blindbanter@gmail.com, and please do, because the inbox is a little lonely, so it could definitely use some company. You can reach us on Instagram at The Real Blind Banter. You can reach us Twitter at The Blind Banter, Facebook Blind Banter, and you can also YouTube us at Blind Banter as well. And in the next upcoming weeks, I'm hoping to have the podcast feed up and running so that you can use it for just audio if you don't want to use the video. So that's something that we're working very diligently on. So I want to thank you, Carlos, for your time tonight, and we will all see you guys next time. And until next time, stay safe.
Thanks, guys.